Hello, my name is Anthony Wall. I was next to the World Trade Center the morning of the attack in the Ninth Circuit Court, right before the attack. The court right next to the World Trade Center Towers in New York, Manhattan, New York, New York. And I was there the night before in the hotel next to it. And there are people involved with the Weathersfield police who attached me to fake conversations and being at the police station when I was a kid. That wasn't at all. Fake ties, fake nature ties to me. As a kid, now as an adult. 3 times, people with Hartford Hospital, their patients, and there are doctors there. Foreign and domestic intelligence, foreign and domestic families involved with the Leahy family that fake transcripts through the mail to other people. They won't communicate with me. Now, WFSB also attached me to fake ties to doctors as a kid that weren't at all, and as an adult. And when there was exceptions, they're using that criminally foreign influence too. In other words, they forced me for a mental evaluation. They have whole family there named Leahy, generations of a Leahy family, have multiple courts personally and professionally involved with them with all kinds of natures of organized crimes and criminally foreign influence uses of investigators, manifest the countries A through C too, A through Z at the same time too. People, oh, this is debatable. That's why they're playing games. They put me in fake conversations. It's not debatable. They understand what I'm saying. They have people fishing. They have former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members, and involved with spots in Hartford. One of the things, a whole bunch of people with the use of location, like timing where I'm going to be and try to pretend to know me. Then years later, they all try to make it look like I'm part of their group or something like that. I caught them with untimely deaths. They know Facebook knows that. Facebook has collusions with sexual medical offenders of kids, interbranch and foreign families with them, with digital crimes and whiting forensics. Fox Connecticut News with the intelligence next to them or the difference of the guilt of the intelligence there. The same thing with the WFSB. The same thing with WTNH and the FBI is next to them. When did the FBI have credibility? Oh, that's debatable. Oh, we have to have, in other words, focus on the predicate acts methods they have. They're lying to you where they have the right to lie, reading of statutes and precedents, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrong, and they're worse than criminally incompetent. We have black people's whites of eyes to discern this. Here, attend. So many involved former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. They have a Robert Chevrolet and locations associated with him, involved with people named Spada too. I mean Scalora. People named Spada sought me out too, and they were forced, tricked, and persuaded by intelligence families tied to them to put fake things in sequence shifts and fake motivations, even with real ones. Use that to screen what was actually recorded there. In other words, a Fred Grisette is one of the ones involved with them. An internet spotter sought me out years later to record that. He's one of the ones involved with he has all kinds of federal evidence of his crimes with probate court judges involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, drugs and medicines crimes with the interagencies. A whole bunch of people tied to a Ray Cololo and a Joe DeMoro have the corrections offices and houses next to it involved with foreign and domestic military and people that with the Weathersfield Community Center involved with them with locations in West Hartford, also with Eric Burgess and Justa Kovinskis. Sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. I never had a class with them. Never saw them on campus. One time trying to make a fake. Oh, you don't remember that time? In other words, I record. It's recorded. They're trying to make fake exceptions with people that went to my grammar school that I had nothing to do with. I don't know them at all. Increasingly, people tied to my grammar school have roles with people next to campuses I went to before that too, with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them. In other words, and then they're, oh, you're lying because you know we're talking about us. They brought their names up. These are people that are, you guys are sick into branch. You had other things communicated for James Madison. You can't have a logical conversation with people because the names of the people, the scientists, are grouped criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, and their educators were. In other words, we have black people's whites of eyes to discern this. There was slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies even. No one wanted collusions with that. Every little kids could discern American history by just using nature. Let alone, you guys have replaced what our founders told us. Not they told us the only founder, they made it for us to understand clearly why and how that breaching method and why how it forced everyone to lie about their actual motivations for why they were complying with the counter extortion of themselves too. In other words, they had to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. The only reason the North or the South fought was for freedom, but not against each other. There was a breaching method that was measuring and maintaining. Everyone rolls with such, all kinds of things at once. If anyone tried to break any part or the group parts of it, that would be sensed because everyone was measured and maintained not just by internationally monitored conversations, but the differences of guilt of them, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, and a whole bunch of other countries, group tactical terror from how nature has us generated as human species body, individual species body, made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. And other species, individual bodies, how also a whole bunch of individual bodies, all group differences like male, female. If there anyone had been legitimate with science, you would have observed what nature itself generates, that difference, the difference slash S. It's generating it. And that's where we look for the answer. But you guys are pretending things are debatable offensively that are not. And as collusion slash S with use remotely slash S of names on all sides of criminal civil cases in the interbranch and the intelligence tied to them, foreign and domestic too, using consciously where and how they are directed to hide their roles with the other countries involved. Our Violet family has roles with the agencies, influenced him also with courts and foreign and domestic military, with Hartford Hospital campus, Trinity College campus, UConn campuses, Central Connecticut State University campuses before and after the World Trade Center attack. They have roles with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and with some sexual and medical offenders that make confessions and demonstrations of their roles. They confirmed with them with some KKK confessions. And they're faking ties to me with our Bryan family, Collusion family, with some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, Italian theme, Irish theme, Korean theme, Russian theme, Ukrainian, all at the same time. You guys have time collusions at Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, Connecticut, also with some Jewish theme, different Catholic theme, Christian theme. In other words, you guys are nutbags too when you speak, where you make differences. That's why no one even knows. The beginning of the Old Testament, it says all that matters. You don't have to believe it. In other words, I'm not like someone else. Oh, you feel it? It says all that matters. It only depends right here, it says, rather, where the names of the people of the sciences will come together in the part that comes before it. And that's before the part with Adam and Eve and their generation. And all that, in other words, I don't even know the rest of the Bible. It says all that, only defend right here. See, we can discern that they're defending in reality, not legitimately with care. The suburbs were designed to only allowed to unfold the way they did. Since before cars, there were houses built for that torture, extortion, slavery method, and collusion slash us against women's difference, against men's, against little kids difference, against adults, and while for it as collusion slash yes, because the breaching method were only allowed that where I'm talking about the against. We have to pay attention to the breaching method our founders discerned through James Madison and through how and why we were directed to not allow people to be, we're only supposed to appreciate James Madison as the only founder that we know the name of specifically. See, that people pretending they're pretending that's debatable. Oh, Thomas Jefferson's the drafter. Meanwhile, there was still slavery entrenched. There was a breaching method, and James Madison's plan, they had to counter-extort people at key locations and force them to take part with the Declaration of Independence, force them to take part with the Constitutional Convention, force them to take part with the American Revolution. And with that James Madison's plan, that's what caused the Civil War. Besides the breaching method, that had roles with everything that no one wanted roles with. They also didn't want to have that discerned relative to where and to how and to why. Our founders declassified enough for us to there was a breaching method that didn't allow anyone free speech, while everyone had to pretend other to an extent, not just because they were overt. Not just because they were internationally monitored conversations, measuring and maintaining everyone. That's different countries through different countries. Those countries divided by international companies that didn't like each other, didn't like the other ones themselves. In other words, since England doesn't even remember the history of English because we are in a semi-ancient trap that got the only people who operate the names of countries A through Z. It caused them to blame other things, others or selves for things it caused. And then it caused them to counter that as names A through Z. And then to defend that. And it maintained them blaming other things, others or selves, where and how it was watching and maintaining it is. Like the World Trade Center attack. WFSB is screening and sensing for a breaching method. They have people I don't know the names of from Saudi Arabia or with that dress involved too with the locations with foreign and domestic military, Marines. There's a Marine family, I believe, on Meadowgate Street. I don't know if they still live there. There's a Kerr family that sought me out. They're one of the ones that planted evidence on my street years ago and on Meadowgate. And on the side entrances, they have collusions with a former Mayor Gold. Confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed. They put fake things in databases and they act tied to it. People we never had anything to do with on campuses. In other words, they try to make fake. So we played football one time. In other words, they have all along Route 3 roles with a whole bunch of other countries in DACA, apparently. That's what they're, in other words. And that and conjunctions to Route 3 into that is the state judicial branch offices, which is also involved with people named O'Brien and DeMoro and Oliveri, involved with at Trinity College with an untimely death, and roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders with a Joshua Stryker, and others putting fake things in campuses. I went intercities. He's involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and various natures of federal criminals, some of them his co-defendants, who are also at and next to Hartford Hospital and at and next to Hartford's Fox Connecticut News, involved with a Thaddeus Grabowski and with Allison Mulcahy and her neighbors with various courts and Route 3 and a domain family, and involved with that corner next to Fox Connecticut News with a bunch of people on all sides of criminal and civil cases, male and female investigators and judges. There are black or white female judges involved with some sexual and medical offenders of kids proven years apart, first force. They have rules with the first force part. And some black KKK, black team, Latino team, digital crimes of whiting forensics too, with foreign and domestic, Navy, military, Air Force. I never had a word of conversation with the Paul Kelly. Increasingly, they have roles with people with the foreign and domestic military on Griswold Street, and like with a Peruta family involved with the fire department, with Inspector Mike, who's refusing to identify himself, and one of other judges. Other courts, families. It's recorded how victims advocates years apart, they have time collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and sexual and medical offenders of kids. They're keeping people's mouths shut. They're incapable of speaking for crimes because they've been roles of predicate acts with fax methods recorded, and they're obfuscating those evidences and hiding the actual value that is actually discernible of their readings of statutes and precedents. I'm not even a lawyer, black pupils. We have to hear, discern. Period. Who disbelieves? Get them on paper, one name and sequence, please. So in other words, that's what they're doing. They're using wire crime acts and methods and pretending not to realize. So they want to make it, they show a picture of someone getting arrested. They're hiding what came first. Don't forget, you guys have rape threats and sexual medical offenders of kids years apart. All kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, putting fake ties and natures of ties to people in databases and having people act tied to that as time collusions with a whole bunch of other countries. But we have to, I'm not going to seek them out first. Well, the background of the interbranch, then further hyper additionally with the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices. They have collusions with recorded use /s of names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, originally and still in the interbranch, in the intelligence, foreign and domestic, as they're shared, directed to hide it a whole bunch of ways, and then uses that to hide other things, as the breaching method knew they would. And then it shows them, and now it shows them. In other words, there's a Perón family, and there's a Violet family, and others. A Violet family and a Perón family, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have corners of streets and roles with federal evidences, crimes, identity thefts, and frauds with a former mayor, Gold, and people planting evidences at parks so others could take pictures and make it fake exceptions. Has something to do with the roles with proven sexual medical offenders of kids and ones with syntax involved with that, with predicate acts, with people on all along Route 3 tied to Mark Violet too, and religious spot. And those are people involved with some untimely deaths. Even if they made it up, they're intercities connected. And they brought my neighbors into that and planting evidences with people from other areas. They forced my past neighbors to collusion /us with it. And he might have been, one of them might have been dead. They might have killed him because they have roles with years apart, untimely deaths, murders, confessions, all brought up at the same time. And they put me to fake communications with my family about this and about the World Trade Center. And I was in the Ninth Circuit Court right next to the World Trade Center. Get me off the fake conversations with all these people, get them on paper. I caught them before the World Trade Center attack, too. I didn't know all their names. In other words, a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, effected confessions to me and requests for help. And regarding location /s uses, inter and intra-cities, that had also been brought up to me by other people, like that are now involved with the child abusers and on my street, tied to a Collo house and the Smith house, brought up by the police that are switching and forging names in the courts. And the kids said that they would do that, and then they make people use their name. They sequence shifts. They're putting fake things in databases, fake ties, fake nature ties to people. Ray Collo recorded, he planted evidences and did that with and used it to cover up why he wanted to come to the prom with me and my girlfriend, or I wasn't my girlfriend at the time. They had lied to her years before that by using truth. In other words, I didn't explain that, but it's increasingly involved with people tied to, like former Governor Malloy had roles with the principal child abusers campus, forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded. But see, I don't know Governor Malloy. I don't know if he ever pretended he knew me, but people pretended to him they knew me. WTNH next to the FBI in New Haven. They have collusion /s planting evidences and fake ties to me with people named O'Neill and others at corners of streets that also have the Russians involved, and an O'Brien family involved with people from Korea, people from Russia, and with a former mayor Gold and other mayors and their family members involved with untimely deaths and federal evidences, crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, sequence shifts, fake motivations, planting too, because they have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. That's why you guys pretend not to believe that people could use their black pupils, whites, and wives alone to discern criminally foreign influence readings of statutes of precedent. That's why really they are incapable of speaking for the law legitimately and of affording to be discerned what our founders communicate. They need to pretend, like even Judge Napolitano, one of the smartest guys, still, in other words, not supposed to refer to Thomas Jefferson as our founder. You don't know that. The only founder that you're supposed to know is because the experts use their expertise to get over on anyone who brings it up. our founders directed us to understand why and how the only founder's name we know, them plural, was James Madison. And if you're doing that and pretending that, you're being used to sense for the breaching method too. Because you're not telling about what our founders told about. In other words, they forced everyone to be part of the Declaration of Independence. You don't pretend they were capable of speaking for freedom while there was slavery entrenched, and then pretend not to realize why people are calling it racism. A breaching method employed that reaction, and the counters to it as collusion, exceptions to as an array, sensing for it too. Anyone starting to adapt properly. We are being and have been used as systems tactically ulterior from the one generating individual species bodies of individual bodies and group differences like two eyes in birds, fish, humanity, sexes, quality aspects in nature, distinct but non-distinct, and simultaneous, but also per that slash hyper simultaneous. Three natures of hyper invisible but still discernible parts of its complete of the rest of its complete identity. The extent of that individual identity for value progression that we could discern is distinct. In other words, it is a further distinct identity of simultaneous nature. We are distinct from the other species bodies. We are non-distinct from them, and we are simultaneous with them. But there is further that which is neither us nor them, but it is shown to discernible to us this way. Here many pray. Baksin's pantheism is more probably what we are supposed to decipher. But not just pantheism. Pantheism an exception, because that's what, and the ancients would have it as an ism, because nature shows to teach about why and how. In other words, an ism or anything named is about the invisible but still discernible, as the parts of speech are of English grammar, of other languages. But they also are about the slash hyper invisible but still discernible. And that body is discernible as what we are appreciating, where and how and why. There are two participle natures, and they are names hyper additional that we need for verbs. They are inflected not as the main verb, which is why we also have the predicate as a name for a verb. A main verb is a predicate. We are shown. We can only appreciate subjects rather, as subjects a part of speech, of parts of grammar. They're about the invisible but still discernible slash hyper invisible but still discernible. So we could discern this where and how we could only appreciate to finite subjects to an extent, grouped and or active ones to an extent, and progressively and or simultaneously to an extent. But with that, we could also discern that there is not what we could appreciate, but while we are still at it as that which is not us nor the other species bodies, but it is us anyway. There is a distinct identity of volume science here that pantheism is about and that the religions are about. There are proofs that pantheism, some of the people revealed that Allah as the name, and that this is what revealed English too. Alpha longs, long alpha's high. See alpha inside the word alphabet. Each letter spells out a word, and each word spells out a sentence. And so each letter is three values at the same time, three value progression, as one value progression. Kept that way. As value here, only increasingly value. Or as it forced from here, not as death, but as a special difference transfer. Nature's identity shows us Earth has a special difference that is our own, but distinctly. Earth's difference leaves through us. We're the species body that has mercury through all the fish in the sea. So therefore, more than just mercury, plastic. We knew we saw this become. See, what everyone has the nature debate contains quality aspects of nature that are self-value collusion /s. With the breaching method showed you guys to speak about different /s. There are recorded criminally foreign influence tactically delusions raw readings of American history, even by the brightest people. But this could change like this, like real fast. But you have to follow mandated law for them. Or get them to follow mandated law. Please, Judge Napolitano, someone get him to get them on paper, one name and sequence. Get me off the fake conversations with WFSB and get their sources and an interbranch on paper, one name and sequence. Get me off the fake ties to this O'Neill family and the others involved with whiting forensics and with Facebook with them, with digital crimes, with the Joshua Julian, two increasingly tied to sexual medical offenders of kids. I never had anything to do with him. He was pretending that he used the word partying, pretending he was partying with me when I was a kid. I never saw him around ever. In other words, his name was repeated in front of me by a Mark Violet who sought me out to record, capacity, demonstrate, confirm. He has roles of people named O'Brien and Colo on my street. And their roles with, all kinds of planting fake things in databases, and roles of multiple police departments with predicate acts, with facts and child abuses, elderly abuses at the same time. They brought up intercities, elderly homes into it, corners of the streets uses, untimely deaths, body dumping spots years ago. A bunch of people tied to a Sal Civiello and his neighbors have all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, federal evidences, crimes, wire crimes, and roles of child abusers, in other words, with them. And with the Board of Education, with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and people that have long since before our founders were born, people from all these countries were shared here and there, tactically ulterior from how nature uses us, human united species body, simultaneously independent, simultaneously. It's generating and is the value of all group differences, or it demonstrates. We're using systems abridged from and as its own system, as it is itself, as everything. Boxing. Boxing is what makes us shush to hear. What makes no sound but shush. It prefers the shush sound, boxing. Martial arts semi prefer the shush sound, and wrestling does not prefer the shush sound. They share the same identity we gather around. They're about fighting, but by the rules. But the rules have been abridged since some ancient times. So everyone missed how nature was trying to show us there's one way to fight where everyone wins, even those who lose. Otherwise, we sense, and even greater means are there to be found and revealed. And where and how we are quality as fact treatment nature. And see, we're in this trap, a way that's using how we are hyper additionally the identity of the ground. Well, not by any way. Hyper additionally from that which we know that identity of volume science that no one could mimic. In other words, without it demonstrating. See, but nature, like one of the things nature demonstrates is that a breaching method is the scientific value. That all this distinct human rights and different abridgments and affronts were about throughout history. They were all equally about being a human factory nature breaching method. No one wanted collusion /s with this. And there are ways to make hyper positives out of negatives. Black people's peer who disbelieve. Get them onto paper, please. There's violence involved. In other words. And these are also people who put the threats through, and they yell things out, and they do it to other. a whole bunch of people like tied to Mendez police, involved with predicate acts with fire departments and their families, and with medical and sexual offenders of kids involved with them. Further, with the principal upskirt nature. I caught with way worse involved with that. With New Britain Superior Court, Wethersfield Police Department, next to the networks. Get them off the fake ties to me, fake nature ties to me. They have something to do. They have proof that someone took a picture to make a fake exception. I was only in their car for like one moment with Justin Kalvinskis and Eric Jensen and Eric Mendez pulled up to a food bag. And that people that also their intelligence families associated with that food bag who are also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with like people involved with some untimely deaths tied to Mike Roberts and locations associated with him and with Robert Rodriguez and their roles all along Route 3 with people with untimely deaths years apart who have roles with some home break-ins and a girl that was forced to collusions with that. And to cover that up, it was used to abuse her and others as people involved with the state board of education, houses next to it, and mayors and people tied to their neighbors, like a John DeMauro is involved with the FBI director, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with the houses and businesses next to the Hartford Hospital. And he said he confessed collusions. I never saw him there. He wanted me to go in a car with him when I was a kid to the side of Caldor. And increasingly, people involved with the World Trade Center attack from other countries and other cultures had insidious things. Mike Levine is one of the ones further with that, also with the principal child abuser. He brought up the name Mike Levine. And see, these are Sandy Hook predators, too. One's named O'Brien, or one guy said Ray and O'Brien, too, as one of the confessions. And they have people with the name Cintron from Puerto Rico, involved with a retired longtime police chief from Wethersfield, Cintron, involved with identity theft, fraud, slingers, and a bunch of people and their intimate ties intimate ties to a retired police chief, Cintron, and 1 year before him, with the same house, further involved with the child abusers, and with the people with the World Trade Center attack, interstates and internations. And in other words, get them on paper, one name is sequence interbranch. These are people already collusions with all sides of criminal and civil cases in the interbranch interstates, putting fake things in databases. And since founding, we can discern it with this. Let's follow the fake news. I mean, let's in other words, because they're following the money because they know things are classified that they're not going to be able to go into it, or they'll do a whole investigation to waste time. They have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and precedents only capable of being relative to where and how. We could discern being and having been replaced, and we could discern use/s of how it is replaced, with the breaching method read and appreciated before anyone else did, even though it's known. With James Madison communicated about the breaching method, how nobody had free speech, how you don't vote on slavery. They're still teaching that, they voted this through, the states voted against. Everyone was forced to be fake. Badios. We're going to change it from bullshit to badios. So, in other words, because this big news that we need emphatic words. Badios is also a word to me, not like, in other words, a negative version of babadialos, which is when we are being positive to the individual part of the human species body, the group parts inactive, and the human species body. This breaching method is sophisticated. This is a behavior racketeering worse than war crimes. This has the experts of types of things, collusions with them. Please, Mr. Holman, you'll be able to discern this. Recorded are all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes, and relative delusions. We're supposed to be on the experts on reason. They have roles with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and as private ones too. At the same time, multiple roles, collusions with the remote uses of all sides, everything that came before them, and further hyper additionally, remote use is collusion /S with remote use /S of the state of Connecticut and they're demonstrably interstate. These are people tied to Washington, D.C. with 2 speech class teachers I had in high school. Involved too with narratives in the background, covering up what I caught them doing before that. Dear God. These are people also tied to child abusers, leaders of kids' first force. These are not legitimate roles with intelligence agencies. In other words, are you out of your fucking mind? Excuse me, we need some new words here. We're going to show you how to think.